Mark Raffan, it's exceptional to have you here. You're a sales and procurement veteran. And I really, what speaks to me there is you've been on the other side of the table. You know all the tricks, all the tactics, all the vulnerabilities of salespeople. I am a salesperson. Like, I have a sales background. I know you do too. And you originally transitioned from sales into negotiations and procurement. But it'd be good to get you to explain your background and how you got in to now becoming the CEO and founder of Negotiations Ninja and a podcast with exactly the same name that has taken off around the world. And it is the number one podcast for negotiations, influence, and persuasion. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. I am stoked to have you, and I know the audience is too.
Tim, I got to take you on the road with me, man. That introduction was incredible. Holy smokes. That was amazing.
Blew you away. That's what we aim to do.
Yeah, man. Listen, I sold my soul to the devil. I've crossed over to the dark side early on in my career, worked in procurement for a very long time, and decided at the end of that, on my journey towards enlightenment, that I didn't want to do the corporate thing anymore. And I started Negotiations Ninja, which actually started out as a blog. And then that blog turned into a podcast. And then that podcast turned into a training company. And then that training company now is one of the more recognized negotiation training brands in the world. And it's been an amazing journey, and I'd be remiss if I told you that it was all sunshine and rainbows and lollipops and happiness, because it certainly wasn't. But it's been an incredible time, man.
I know you've been recognized by many publications as one of the top 10 negotiation gurus, and just the work that you're doing, like, we need to call it out. You're doing work with big clients, big clients like Salesforce. Like, you're out there training these teams on how to negotiate, how to persuade. And what I love about it is, and I'd love to get your take on it, I believe, and I think there'd be probably a lot of misconceptions as people in these big companies coming in thinking they think they know about what negotiation is.
Yeah.
When you're spinning, and I listened to your work, I've been involved in it, I love what you're doing. It's that the negotiation is everything, and I just want to unpack that. What from your side do you see as the biggest misconception from teams that come to you for help in negotiation?
I think the biggest misconception that people have about negotiation is this preconceived idea that it's a tactical exercise, right? People believe that there is a magic set of lines or a string of words to say that's amazing, or certain inflection points that you make within that string of words that somehow delivers all these magical rewards that exist. And the reality is it's significantly more strategic than it is tactical. And while the tactics are great, don't get me wrong, the tactics are wonderful. Learning what to say, learning how to say it, that's all great. But if you don't plan for the negotiation well, if you don't strategize well, it doesn't matter how good your tactics are, because you won't even know how to achieve what it is you want to achieve. You won't even know what to achieve unless you have the right strategy in place. So it doesn't really matter how good the tactics are. First, you have to figure out what it is you want and how you're going to get there. And then you need to develop the tactics. And so I think the biggest misconception that a lot of people have with negotiations is that it's a tactical exercise, but it's really not.
Okay, so they're coming into it looking like there's a series of things they can do, and if they do them in the right
Right.
way, they'll get the output, but they don't even know what the output is that they want, and that's the biggest problem straight up front.
Yeah, and I don't think it's their fault, right? I mean, the misconception exists because the media and movies and the internet has had us believe that there for some reason it's sexy on TV or in movies when you see movies like Wolf of Wall Street or Boiler Room or Glengarry Glen Ross, and people pick up the phone and all of a sudden magically out of thin air a deal appears because of the words they're saying and how they're saying it. And that it's for effect in
Mhm.
movies. Unfortunately, that's lulled us into this idea that that's how you negotiate, and it's just not. Negotiation actually is significantly more boring than
Mhm.
than the movies would have you believe. It's way more strategic, well thought out, formulaic. Yes, there is some drama involved in it. Yes, there is some inflection points that you can make, but that only comes after you build a good strategy.
Beautiful, beautiful, Mark. And I know I want to call out to the audience right now. for anyone listening right now. Mark has a new book out, 9 Secrets to Win Deals and Influence Stakeholders. Very excited about this. 9 secrets. Mark, I don't want you to reveal everything because I want people to go get the book. I've read part of the book and I believe that this book is going to take you on a journey. And I love the way that you explore some of the characters that I think people relate to. Can you just drop us a few hints about what those 9 secrets might be, or what this leads into and what this could do for the reader?
Yeah, the 9 secrets were there and designed to really show people that there are 9 very straightforward, simple, formulaic steps to be able to achieve great negotiations and great value in your negotiations. And I'll give you sort of a hint into secret number 1, because I believe that this is really the foundation of everything that you have to do in negotiation. And in fact, if you don't understand secret number 1, all of the other things that you do in negotiations don't work anyway. And this goes back to maybe this misconception that a lot of people have about negotiations to begin with. And whenever I chat with sales teams, the misconception is, Mark, teach me the tactics, teach me the things I need to know. And I say, cool, what do you want to get out of your negotiation? They say, well, Mark, I want a great deal in quotes. Well, and then I say, okay, what does that mean? They said, well, I want to make money. And I say, great. So does everyone. What does that mean? And we reveal very quickly that they actually don't really know what it is they want to achieve. And we go through a number of examples in secret number 1 where we talk about what is it that you actually want? Because if you come to me and you say, Mark, I want a great deal, I want to make money, I'm going to say that doesn't mean anything. Tell me what it is you want to do, what you want to negotiate in order to make more money. Like, do you want to increase prices? Do you want to cross-sell more products? Do you want to utilize assets that you haven't already utilized? Do you want to upsell additional services that you can move into the customer's threshold? These are things that people don't think about, and they kind of just shoot from the hip whenever they start their negotiation. And when I say, well, could you want all of these things? They say, well, yeah, that'd be nice. I say, okay, cool. Let's create a list of things that you might want to actually negotiate into the deal. Let's prioritize that list, and let's focus on those things to achieve the goal. We call them aspirational goals, to achieve the aspirational goal of making more money. Now, another aspirational goal is you might want to reduce risk. And then I'd say, cool, how are you going to do that? Well, there are different things that we could negotiate into the contract to help us to reduce risk. And we go down the line, identifying all of those aspirational goals, breaking them down so that you can actually achieve things. Because without that, you're kind of flying blind.
Definitely, Mark, you just hit it. Like, I think this combines into the fact that people, like you say in the book, like people are probably winging it. They're going in blind, and then they're left like blind with someone who is an expert. If you're going in and you're a procurement expert, you know all the tricks, the tactics, and you're going to weaponize that. You're going to manipulate it. And something that I know, I mean, there's so much. I'm so glad you're on the podcast because there's so much I want to explore. But a lot of what you talk about and what I love about your work is about minimizing risk. So what you're saying is know what you want, have these aspirational goals, maximizing revenue, maximizing profits. What is it? Minimizing costs. Like, but really it comes down to controlling risk. Like, what is it about risk that kind of helps if you have that perspective? Like, if you come into a negotiation and you're there and you're thinking about minimizing risk, like what is it about risk that helps us?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of salespeople think about risk because they're comped based on top line revenue, right? And so if you're comped based on top line revenue, you don't necessarily care about the risk that the company takes on. But the question that I always ask sales leaders and salespeople in a senior level is to say, at what point would you say no to an unlimited amount of money? And they naturally say, well, I would never say no to an unlimited amount of money. And I'd say, I think you would. What if there was a risk that your family could die? Oh, I would say no immediately. There's no question I would say no. I say, okay, that's an extreme example. But now, what if there's a chance that the company might go under? Well, I'd probably say no. And I say, well, okay, well, what if there's a chance that the company could lose the same amount of money that you gain? Well, then it doesn't really make sense. Oh, okay, now we get to the crux of the situation. Risk is this incredible thing that puts companies at risk and puts companies under pressure if and when they agree to things that don't necessarily align with their interests or things that they can do. So sometimes we get so enamored and so taken by the top line revenue number that we don't necessarily think about the risks that are positioned to be able to achieve that line revenue number. So, for example, one of the examples that I give in the book is there's a salesperson who sells used equipment and heavy earth moving equipment, and they're going in to do work on a particular job site. And the procurement person says to the salesperson, I'll give you the amount of money you want for this job, just as long as you can start in May. And the salesperson gets super excited and they're like, yeah, I want to do it. That sounds amazing. They come with a deal to their boss and they say, hey, look, we got this deal. And the boss says, hang on. They just said yes to that proposal. And the boss is like concerned and confused because procurement people never just say yes. So they sift through the deal and the boss finds out that, hey, we agreed to start in May. And she looks at her employee, her sales employee, and says, you know what happens in May in this geographic location? It rains. It rains in May. The entire month is basically lost. We've now lost an entire month of production. You've put us in a very difficult position. Now we have operational and even environmental risk that's associated towards our company. If we decide to move equipment on site early, we're going to be in a very difficult position to be able to do this. We can't do this deal. We'd be screwed. We wouldn't even be able to execute. It doesn't matter how much money they pay us. We can't operationally do it. There's too much operational risk. Go back and renegotiate the deal. And so dejected and deflated, the salesperson goes back and tries to renegotiate the deal. And therein lies the problem with risk is we get starry-eyed about revenue. We get so excited about revenue that we're like, oh, what's the risk? And sometimes people think, well, Mark, risk, it'll never happen. It's too far away. I've been in situations where it has.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, sure, risk is not binary, right? There's a probability that it may or may not happen, but sometimes those risks are very dangerous, and salespeople just don't think about it.
Definitely. And John in the book goes back deflated and sad and also like he's learned a lesson, a valuable lesson,
Yes,
like pre-planning up front. That's the thing
yes,
you're looking to drive. I mean, you drive so much value in this book up front that like if they only just had that one secret as a salesperson, they'd flip and become more valuable in the organization. Because if you're going to your boss, your manager, your CRO, whoever it is, and you've gone through the thinking and the pre-planning to actually come, here's the risks, here's what we want as an organization, here's what we want as an individual. But you're not just
yes,
thinking what's in it for me. You're thinking, hey, company, organizational, operational risk. This is what actually makes this a bad deal, but actually it's being sold in as a good deal. So in that, do you think then people get tripped up in thinking that when it comes to price, when it comes to that kind of part of the negotiation, that is the negotiation? And the fact is that I think you call this out quite a lot, that the negotiation is everything. Like, what's your take on that?
um, I think because there seems to be people conflate the word negotiation with other words, right? So they conflate the word negotiation with alignment. They conflate the word negotiation with discussion or conversation or all of these things that are going on. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is we believe that the negotiation is independent of those things when in fact those are things that are the same. And in fact, in the introduction, which is not in the sneak preview, but in the introduction of the book, I give an example about how me as a procurement person has several conversations, quote unquote conversations, with a salesperson prior to the negotiation where I am consistently seeding the idea of concessions in their minds by saying stuff to the effect of, wow, Tim, you're super collaborative. I really love that about you, Tim. You know, I just love how collaborative you are. I love that you're always focusing on a win-win and looking out for the best needs of the customer. How did you do that? Is that because you've been in sales for a really long time and I'm going to make you feel good about it and I'm going to make you feel good about being collaborative so that by the time we get to our actual first negotiation, I've seeded the idea of you being collaborative, you
Mm.
searching for a win for me, you looking out for my best interest, so that when I say to you, hey, Tim, we really need this, and you give me the first, like, oh, Mark, I'm really not sure, I might say, Tim, I thought we were working together here, man. I thought you were looking out for the cut. Was I wrong about that, Tim? And now, because I've seeded that idea before, you're going to say, no, 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 Mark, that's not what it is. I'm absolutely, let me take this back to my team. And so now I've got you in a position where you've automatically started to fold before we've even had the first conversation.
Mark, for people on the podcast, I'm smiling a lot here because this is the key. And what Mark just talked you through is a very subtle subconscious thing that the pros can do without you even noticing that they're doing it. They're going to lure you in and put things in the deal so that they can give them away later and actually just get the deal they wanted and make you feel like you got a good deal. That's it,
That's
Mark.
right.
How prevalent is that? Like, how much of a problem is this?
I mean, it happens all the time. I sell negotiation training for a living to procurement and salespeople. And I
Yeah.
can tell you that procurement people still try to do that with me. Well, Mark, we'd really, and I'm like, listen, can we cut the nonsense? Can we just talk to each other like human beings, please? So it happens way more often than you would think it happens. And it happens at such a level, and it's so conversational, and it's so seemingly seemingly innocent in the conversation that we don't even notice when it's happening because it's layered in multiple conversations about, wow, we're really excited to work with you. We respect you so much. Your work is incredible. And so they're going to layer that into the conversation so that you're feeling good about this whole interaction. You're feeling amazing. And then they lay it on you. I mean, it's very, very pervasive. It's a cultural thing within that world.
Mm. It slips in, and before you know it, before you don't even realize it's in,
You
and
don't
then
even
it's in your
realize it.
house and it's taken over, and then they're using that to manipulate whatever's going on next from the deal.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love this stuff. I'm really this is the crux of influence and persuasion. This is what we're talking about here. It's being highly skilled, and these are such valuable skills. What do you think about today's economy? Like, how can people like how obviously we're doing this right now, a podcast virtually, like on video. Like, how has that changed in business, B2B, in sales? Like, this is obviously being conducted over video as well. Like, what are the changes that have happened in today's economy? What should people be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, ever since the event that shall not be named, we've all gone online, right? And so
Right.
everything is virtual, everything's online, and it makes things, I think, easier in some respects, but a lot more difficult in others. Because the amount of influence that I can have on a person when we're in person can sometimes feel significantly greater than if we're online. Because if we're online, you have the ability to shut off your video. I have the ability to shut off my video. We have the ability to try and transact in an email environment. And unfortunately, this puts us into a very difficult position because the vast majority of communication is nonverbal. So whenever you're trying to do negotiations online, I know that there's this idea that if we do it over email, we're going to expedite the negotiation somehow. That's not true. We're just going to miss out on a lot of available communication. We're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities to influence the counterparty and to actually develop rapport and a bond that we wouldn't necessarily have if we just defaulted to a text environment. So with regards to where we are in the digital landscape, if you do decide you're going to do it virtually, which is 99% of the negotiations that are taking place right now, make sure that you have your camera on. Make sure the counterparty turns their camera on. If they don't turn their camera on, don't turn your camera on because now you're at a strategic disadvantage. But do ask them to, right? Ask them ahead of time. Just say, hey, I'm old fashioned. I'd like to know that I'm working with another person, not just an empty box on my desk. I want to make sure that we actually develop rapport with each other. What a lot of people do, interestingly enough, which I think is a mistake, is that they turn their camera's self view off. So they see the counterparty, but they don't see the video feedback of themselves. And this is actually where I think
Mm.
that negotiations virtually are sometimes more interesting and easier. Because in a normal in-person interaction where there's no video, I don't get video feedback of myself. The only feedback I get is your facial expressions
Hmm.
telling me how I'm doing. But in a virtual environment, if I have my self view on, then I get your facial expressions and I get my own video feedback, which doesn't exist in the real world, right? So I can adjust real time in a video interaction with different body language, with different things that I'm doing to make myself maybe be more engaging, maybe to get your attention more, maybe to drive a different point. And that's completely different than if we were in person. The cool thing about video as well is it allows me to utilize different tools. So virtual whiteboards and things like that to work through problems have become pretty prevalent, and I highly encourage the use of those. Where I start to see video interactions and negotiations go off the rails is don't where people communicate with their teams in the same chat as the counterparty. So I've seen people say things in video interactions that they shouldn't have said to the counterparty, but should have said to their team privately. For example, I was in a negotiation the other day where I was coaching someone and someone else typed into the chat that was visible to everyone, "I can't believe they're going for this. What a bunch of dummies."
Oh my goodness.
A very, very big mistake. So sometimes we type things we shouldn't type, say things we shouldn't say. So if you do have a team-based negotiation and you're going into a virtual negotiation, I'm a big proponent of having that on a completely separate chat, right? Chat with your team separately while you're having the negotiation. That's great, but have it on a completely separate chat and never, ever, ever communicate with your team in the virtual chat of the real negotiation. Have a separate chat entirely so that you don't make those mistakes.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, it's almost like don't let your guard down because
Yeah.
you're just on video for yourself. Don't start like, and that's it. Real time feedback. If you're starting to slouch, you can put yourself in a power position
Yeah,
and it's real
exactly.
time feedback. It's great. I want to circle back just to the question before because something came to mind. Right, if you're an absolute weapon at negotiation, you've been to negotiations ninja training, you understand. And I love that you say this. It's like martial arts. Once you become a negotiations ninja, it's a lifelong practice. Like that it's the art of practice, right? The art of
That's
negotiation
right.
is all about practice. But say you are highly skilled and you're dangerous in negotiation. You're able to get what you want. You're able to walk into negotiations and you're putting things, you're seeding and influencing right from the get-go. You're putting things on the table. The whole setup has got a lot of parts of this deal that you can remove, and it
Mhm.
makes sense because you're leading the other party down the track. Say you're the other party, what should they be looking out for? Because I'm just is the goal here isn't necessarily to become someone that can just absolutely dominate and just crush the other side yet. And I know that we have a similar philosophy here around not needing to approach this from a win-win perspective because there is no
Correct.
such thing. Like, how does someone on the other side combat that if they think that there are things in the deal that are just like, you're really good at negotiation, you're commercial, your acumen, the way I'm feeling really good about myself. Hey, hang on, what should they look out for?
Yeah, I think we'll go back to secret number one. Know what you want. Know how you're going to get those things. Know what your range of acceptable outcomes are for each of those things. Remember, those things are not binary, right? So there's a range that we can and cannot accept. And then know what you're going to ask of the counterparty, and then have a very, very clear definition of what it is you are willing to give away.
Mm-hmm.
This is what a lot of people don't realize about concession management. They take the concessions as they come. If you don't know what it is you're willing to give away in a negotiation, and you don't know what you're going to ask for in return for the things that you give away, it becomes incredibly challenging to manage your concessions throughout because the sale process is about building value. right? So if I'm a good salesperson, my job is to build as much value as I can through that sales process so that the big number at the end is good for me and I drive value for the customer, right? So I'm getting a lot of money because of the value that I'm delivering, but I'm continuing to build value by adding in additional things. And then once I have that value, my job at the point of negotiation with a very strong commercial negotiator on the other side, whether it's procurement or someone in a commercial circumstance, is not just to maintain that value, but to protect that value as well. Right. So now that we've built all this value throughout the sales process, what a tragedy it would be to have that value built and then get it cut in half by someone who's very well developed on the other side. The easiest way to be able to protect that value, we call it protecting the gold. To be able to protect the gold, you have to have a very good sword and have very good shield. That shield is your concession strategy. And that concession strategy is very, very clearly identified with the things that you might be willing, keywords, might be willing to give away, and knowing very, very clearly what you're going to ask for in return. Because the situation that a lot of salespeople get into, Tim, is the counterparty asks us for, let's just say we're in sales, counterparty asks us for a discount. Hey, salesperson, thanks so much for this. Give us a better deal. And then we, because we're so afraid of losing that sale or we're so afraid of rejection, we say, okay, and that's kind of the end of the conversation. We just give them what they ask for. This is a mistake because now you've just gifted them value. Instead, you need to be thinking about, well, do I have to give the full thing that you've asked for? Could I give you part of that? Could I meet your need with something else entirely? And if I do have to give you that full thing, what am I going to ask for in return so that I'm not in a trade deficit? Because if I'm just giving you something, I've lost money on that. I've made a concession. I haven't protected the gold. And now I'm in a sticky situation.
That's so good. That's so good. And there's a lot of salespeople that will listen to this show that can just rewind the last 5 minutes and just really play that, really understand what Mark's saying, because this happens and it's so common and big. And how does deal fatigue play into this? What if the procurement guy or girl's strategy is like, I'm gonna drag this out and grind you down right up to that walk away point, right up to the breaking point, and then I'm gonna put the deal on the table. How do you combat that?
It's a very common tactic to be able to drag the negotiation out so that you start to experience deal fatigue. And for those people not familiar with deal fatigue, it's that feeling that you get right before the phone call with that person on the other side of the table that says, God, this is the last thing I want to do right now. If you get that feeling, that means you're experiencing deal fatigue, right? It's dragged on for an extended period of time and you're like, oh, I just want this to be over. I just want this negotiation to be done. That's deal fatigue. By the way, if I notice that in you, I'm going to exploit that at every situation that I can. And I'm going to make it seem like I'm doing you a favor to close the deal sooner. So if I see that you're experiencing deal fatigue, I'm going to make sure that I say, listen, you've invested so much into this, Tim. I've invested so much. We don't want to drag this out any longer than we've already collectively. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just, and then I pitch the idea to you, right? Because I'm doing you a favor now, quote unquote favor. I'm saying, let's just close this off. Here's a couple last things that I want to do. And then you think, oh my goodness, mercy, thank you so much. And you agree to that because you think there's an end to this. And then we drag it out just a little bit more and then we hit you with a nibble right on the end. And that nibble is the area where most people end up conceding just that little bit more that they shouldn't. For those of you maybe who are wondering, hey, what's a nibble? I thought we were talking about deal fatigue. It's right at the end of the negotiation when you think you're about to get the deal, right? The procurement person or whomever you've negotiated with on the other side has said, yeah, PO's coming, PO's coming, PO's coming, contract's coming, we're almost there, we're almost there. And they've probably said that several times. And then right before you think the PO is going to come, or right before you think the contract's going to come, you get a phone call, usually about 2 in the afternoon on a Friday, and the procurement person or the commercial person says, hey, I just noticed this one thing, just this one thing that seems to be bugging me. And I just, if we can just close this one thing, we can get that off to you right away. And then they'll pitch something like improved payment terms, or they'll pitch something like reduced timeline, something small, right? Like nothing that's going to be commercially destructive to the deal, but something that's just like that little bit last squeeze of juice that you're like, ah, and then you're so tired, there's so much deal fatigue that you just say, yeah, yeah, fine, that's fine, fine. Can you send the PO today? Yeah, fine. And so you end up agreeing to this little last squeeze, and we call that nibbling because it happens right on the back end of the negotiation when you're super tired with lots of deal fatigue.
I'm having a ball, Mark. This is spot on. This is amazing. Don't get nibbled, people. Don't get nibbled and don't give it away. If you're fatigued, if you're going into that, that's perfect. What you called out at the beginning of that about before you get on the call or before you go into the meeting, if you recognize in yourself that you are feeling like this is the last place on earth that you want to be, you're going to emanate that, and they're going to
That's right.
use that and manipulate. If they're skilled, they're going to see that, and that's where they're going to strike, and then they're going to do exactly what Mark says and take you through right up into the point of pain, maximum pain, and then squeeze that juice. They're going to nibble. I love that. Nibbling.
Yeah, and remember, like, present yourself how you want to be perceived. And sometimes this is where we let video, to your point earlier, this is we fall into this false sense of security with video because we believe that for whatever reason, it's strange, but just because we're on camera, we're not expressing our body language as much. A good strategic negotiator is picking up on every single nonverbal cue that you're giving off. And if you're looking tired, I'm going to use it.
Massively. And you see it. You see people rubbing their eyes, thinking that the
Yeah.
camera's there. The person can see you, but for some
Yeah.
reason it feels like no, no, they're not. They're not watching me. They're not. Yes, they are. They're there,
Yeah,
and they're going
exactly.
to use it.
Exactly.
So win-win. What's win-win not all about?
Oh man, you're do we want to go controversial with this episode? My
I
goodness.
know, I know.
Oh, we're gonna piss a lot of people off with this, Tim. Win-win is the biggest lie that's ever been told in the negotiation world. It is a fallacy, it's a farce, it's make-believe, it's fairy dust. Because it presupposes that it depends on how you think about win-win, right? So let me give you two of the most common answers that I hear when I ask people what they believe win-win is. The first answer is both parties can get equal value. Okay, we'll deal with that in a second. The second answer is, well, both parties feel like they've won coming out of the deal. Okay, so let's deal with the first one, where people say, well, both parties can get equal value. That's impossible. There's no way that both parties are going to get equal value out of the deal because there's no way that both parties will even know what the total value of the deal is over the lifetime of that deal. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that somehow we were able to create this number that showed the total value of that deal over the lifetime of that deal. Now, in order for us to ensure that both parties got equal value out of that total, we would need to be 100% transparent with each other in order to do that, which is also not going to happen. It would also mean that if we were going to be 100% transparent with each other to create this thing that cannot happen, we would also need to be very objective about what fair means, quote unquote fair. But my question would be, what is fair really? Fair is based on what your perception of what fair is, but it's also based on what my perception of what fair is and third parties that are involved. So fair is, by its very nature, a subjective term, which means that we could never actually be objective about it. So this idea that value can be divided evenly amongst both parties is make believe. Okay, so now we've dealt with reason number one. Let's go to reason number two, where people say, well, it's not that, Mark. It's where people feel like they've won out of the deal. Hang on. So if your definition, that actually makes less sense than the first thing. If your definition is that people just need to feel like they've won and that's win-win, then that means all I have to do is emotionally manipulate you into making you feel like you've won. That doesn't sound right. So my whole problem with the idea of win-win is that it's built on shaky ground. If you come to me and you say, Mark, no, I think what they mean is mutually beneficial, then I would say, okay, but then who gets to decide what's mutually beneficial,
Mhm.
right? So if you go into this negotiation trying to achieve what you want to achieve and you achieve that within the range of acceptable outcomes for you, fantastic. If I do the same thing on my side, fantastic. If that then creates something that's mutually beneficial, wonderful. But it shouldn't be incumbent upon me to make sure that you're getting a win or that it's fair. Because if it is, if all that means that all you have to do at any point in the negotiation to get another concession from me is to say, Mark, I don't feel like this is fair.
Mhm.
And now it's incumbent on me to make sure it's fair for you. So I don't know. I have a big problem with it. I've made a lot of enemies as a result of my displeasure with it, but I do have an issue with it.
I think the way you've just talked the audience through and broken it out, it makes a lot of sense. And the problem is win-win is put into that bucket of like it's just a nice statement. It's just easy to roll off the tongue. It sounds
Yeah,
easy when you break it out like that, and you're saying, "Well, I have to be fully transparent with you, but I never met this guy, and now I'm doing a deal.
right.
It's multi-million dollars. Of course, I can't be like human nature's going to take over the strike that they're going to do when I'm fully transparent. It's just not going to happen. So therefore,
Right.
the thing that you're aspiring to have, it's already set up for failure. And walking in to the deal with that mindset of I need to get a win-win and make sure that they like there's ways to manipulate that. I can get you like I love that. You say that you can just manipulate to get them to feel like it was a win-win, but it isn't the concept of a win-win. I think
Yeah.
the way you've broken this out, perfect.
Yeah, and look, there are a lot there's way more negotiation trainers in the world that believe in that than those that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And those people are very vocal on social media against what I've told you. And here's what I would ask you to do. Because what I've said is provocative and controversial, and you're probably thinking to yourself when you're listening to this right now, I don't know, right? Like, how could all of these thousands of other people be wrong? Make up your own mind about what it is you want to do. Go and read their work and then think about what we've spoken to about today and then make up your own mind about it. The problem that I have is it just lulls people into this false sense of security and this naive outlook on negotiations where they believe that the counterparty is in it for their best interests. They're not. They're in it for their own interests. You are there because you have something to provide to them that can help meet their interests. Yes, but they don't care about you. They care about the thing that you're providing. That's it. So just be very core. I would just ask those listeners that are listening to this going, I'm not sure. Just proceed with caution as best you can. Make up your own mind. Read as broadly as you can when it comes to negotiation. Read everyone else's work and then decide what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're really giving people the option to think of another way because I think win-win is so out there and so
Yeah.
easy to grasp in just the concept, and people walk into it blind, and that's the thing
Yeah.
that they're going into wing it, they're going into wing it, and it's not setting themselves up for success or the other party really because they're just going to dominate.
Yeah.
I think there's a nuance here, like you referencing your point about the Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie, like picking up the phone, like smooth talking, being a shark, being a hustler. Like you're not saying that you're going out there to absolutely be this person that because that doesn't
Correct.
exist. This isn't about that. It's being able to influence. And if we're talking about influence and persuasion and being a master and having mastery of that and being able to practice your craft and do post-action reviews and make sure that you're getting better each time, you will naturally understand that you're able to provide value in ways that help the other party, that help you. But
Right.
you don't go in with the intention of it has to be win and it has to be 50-50 and it has to be, it just isn't the right setup.
That's right.
Love it. Yeah, we may have caused some controversy there, but I think it starts the ball rolling, gets people thinking. Because if they are sitting in a negotiation, they're like, "Hey, that I walk away," and then 2, 3 days later, a week later, they start to think of all the other things that they should have said. Go back to Mark's first secret. Go back to secret number one. Get the book and just read. I mean, it's 180 pages. You can smash that out
Quick
in a
read.
couple of days. Yeah,
Quick read.
there's a few different chapters, and they're going to help you structure this in a way that becomes part of your philosophy, part of your identity, someone that can walk in and handle commercial negotiations. This is the skill that you're going to need for this economy, this environment to set yourself apart. Mark, this conversation to me, I'm so glad to have had you on the show. Like just all the bits that you've talked around, people planting things in negotiation, influencing you right from the get-go. The negotiation is the whole thing. Negotiations Ninja. Can you talk a little bit more, just last question, about Negotiations Ninja and the training you provide?
Yeah, absolutely. Negotiations Ninja teaches people how to negotiate and resolve conflict. That's it at its most simplest sense. We do that live, online, or we do it in person on location, wherever you are in the world. So if you're interested in learning more about negotiation, here's what I would have you do. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can just type my name into LinkedIn or go to our website at negotiations.ninja. Check out what we do. We teach people how to negotiate and resolve conflict.
My man, that's a wrap. And I loved this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. You've helped thousands. They're going to change their lives. They're going to go out there and negotiate with confidence, decrease conflict, lower risk. I can just see it. And a lot more people are going to come in and get your book and go on Negotiations Ninja, which I recommend you do. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Tim.